I always wanted to be involved in agriculture. I was raised on a farm, and
A farm here in Carpinteria?
right here in Carpinteria, and
where was that farm?
and that farm is right where we are talking right now. The family moved here in 1921.
By the way, we're at Casitas Pass Road, right by Carpinteria Creek.
That's right, and we're about 2 miles from the ocean, and the farm was all lemons, rhubarb, and some lima beans and oranges, and I was always involved in that. I really enjoyed agriculture and looked forward to a life with agriculture. I went to an agricultural college and came home and eventually have acquired ownership of the original farm that my father started in 1921. When he moved from the East Coast for health reasons, he had a legal office in Washington, D.C., and he was instructed by physicians that he'd be better off getting out into the open spaces and getting into agriculture, and so he moved from Maryland, Washington, D.C. area to Carpinteria. Eventually, he looked all around the state. First, he started in Fresno, but eventually he landed here in Carpinteria, and this property has been owned by my family or myself ever since 1921.
When did you change over to avocados, and was that you or your father?
No, I was the one that instigated that. When I went to agricultural college, I got well acquainted with the instructors, and I was really interested about the future of agriculture, the type of agriculture we had. Would this be always? We also had lima beans that seemed like they were on their way out, and lemons were expensive to handle, and by the time I got out of college, I was convinced that avocados would be better for the conditions we have, which are just ideal for avocados. And soon after I got out of college, when I made arrangements with my family to purchase the property, I planted avocados. And I now have entirely avocados. I don't even raise any rhubarb anymore.
Would you recommend avocado farming or other types of farming to kids today in Carpinteria?
Yes, I would. I certainly would, although it's become much more competitive internationally. We, I believe, are in the ideal place in the world to raise avocados. We are in an area that is close to the consumption peak of avocados. Our competitors have transportation problems bringing in avocados from other areas, but this is just an ideal environment for avocados, and it...
Oh, by the way, where are our competitors who grow avocados?
Well, our competitors are right now in South America, in Chile, and Mexico. Mexico sends most of their fruit now to the East Coast, and we supply the West Coast and the Middle States. Chile has a period of about 6 months where they ship in large quantities of avocados that have been off the tree for maybe 3 weeks or more, which gives them a little problem with maturity and all the travels that you get in changing from different temperatures, warm, cold, and so forth, and the cost of transportation. So they have a little problem there. But so our conditions here are ideal, but we'll always have that competition.
Do you know who the first was to grow avocados in the Carpinteria Valley?
No, I don't, but I know Stanley Shepard was very involved in avocados. I recall that he actually propagated one variety that's known as a Rincon, and he was completely responsible for developing that. And when I planted my orchard, there were numerous experimental fruit that were varieties that were hardly accepted in the Hass avocado, which is now the #1 variety, was a little bit on a question, but the future looked very good. And I planted about 2/3 of my ranch to Hass avocados, and I soon realized that it was by far the best variety, and so I repropagated the rest of the orchard, and we now have entirely just Hass avocados.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever go to Shepherd's Inn? I know that Mr. Shepherd, I guess, started Shepherd's Inn. That was was it up? It wasn't up Gubernador, I guess off of 150. Huh?
Yeah, off of 150 as you start over the Casitas Pass.
And do you remember it, and what was it like?
It wasn't Stanley Shepherd. Stanley Shepherd was extremely active in the avocado business and a very good farmer. But it was Sim Shepherd, a uncle that owned some property up on Shepherd Mesa, and was involved in the Shepherd Inn. Mm-hmm. And that was a very nice place. It was kind of rural, but it was very popular back in the horse and buggy days. I've been told that the horse and buggy wagons came either on the sands along the beach, or preferably they would come up through Casitas Pass from Ventura and not even get into the area of Carpinteria. They'd come up the back way, but that was a long trip to take. But as I understand, Shepherd Inn was a very popular place to go and spend 3 or 4 days. Also, people from Santa Barbara came down to the Shepherd Inn.
On a little bit of a different subject, who were some of the town leaders in the Carpinteria Valley as you grew up? Do any names and personalities come to mind?
I've often thought about that because this valley had an awful lot of Baylors and Shepherds and just a few Martins that were really dominant, but I don't think that really they didn't necessarily control the area politically, and there were more families of that name, but they didn't necessarily have a political control of the valley. I wouldn't say there was any particular families that controlled the valley.
And any politicians come to mind? I guess there was Ernie Wolbrandt, was one of the first mayors.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Ernie it was one that really stepped out. And as far as politicians go, my family was always involved in politics. My father was a state assemblyman.
Really?
And I spent every other year for 3 years, 3 different times, in the state capitol in Sacramento as a page boy, which was a very interesting time of my life. I was the youngest in the family, and the other children were either in upper grades of high school or gone to college, and so I would go with my family and stay and go to family training or some time of evening school and work as a page in the state assembly during the daytime. It was very fun for me because I got involved in just finding out what politics is like and how it works.
Well, to change subjects a little bit, what were your hobbies in your youth?
Well, as I mentioned, agriculture was a real hobby. As far as athletics go, I was more interested in track. I was small, too small really for football, and I didn't get involved in football, but I was very interested in track. And actually, when I went to college, I was still involved in track activities. I was both in the track team and I was captain of the cross-country team, so I really enjoyed that. I always played tennis. I can remember going over to Hwy to the tennis tournaments over there, and at that time I had a friend who was my family rather had a friend who was a Ford dealer here, and he let me use one of his demonstration cars to drive to Hwy when I was a senior in high school, and I was more proud of driving that car than I was going to Hwy to play tennis.
What model and year was the first car you had, and what was it like?
The first car I had was a Model T Ford, and
what year about would that have been?
Oh, that would have been about 29 or 30. And
did you have to crank it up?
I had to crank it, or sometimes I would park it out at the end of our lane, because from the start of our lane it's downhill. And so I would just park it up there where I could just push it and get it started before I got down to the creek, and then I could drive the rest of the way. And I had that painted all red and white, which was our colors, and when we had a football game, why, there would be several cheerleaders on the back of it, and we'd go around town beating the drums and making a big noise. That old car was a great thing for me.
Tell me about the schools that you attended in Carpinteria.
My first school was the main elementary school that is no longer a building, and it was positioned where the present community pool is now. And it was a two-story building that housed elementary classes in the first story and the high school in the upper story. And that was where I started my first grade. I didn't go to a kindergarten, and I started my first grade there with my sister, who was exactly a year older, and they had too many children, not a large enough school to take care of that number of children, and so they went through, and three of us were below the age that should be going to first grade. I guess my folks thought maybe get rid of two of us at one time, but anyway, they sent me home, and I told the teacher, I recall, that was no problem. I should be home irrigating on the farm anyway.
What year were you born in, and so what year might have school been in that school?
I was born in 1919, and I arrived from the East Coast of the state of Maryland. I arrived in Carpinteria in 1921, and so I would have been starting school in 1924, and as it turned out, I didn't start till 1925.
And what other schools did you go to in Carpinteria?
I went to the high school that was no longer in the upper story of the elementary school. I went to the new high school after it was built, and then I went to...
And where was that high school?
And that was right next door to what is now present the community swimming pool on Carpinteria Avenue, which at that time was the main freeway between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. And then I went, and that was the high school. But before going to the high school, I finished part of my elementary in the main school, which is down on Palm.
Oh, and was the main school where the current main school is now?
That's correct, yes.
And so it was built about that time?
Yeah.
And would that have been the late 1920s?
Yes, I think it was, yeah, I believe that's about right, early 30s.
What subjects did you like and dislike?
I was very eager to learn. I I enjoyed math, and I I just was very, as I say, eager to learn, and I enjoyed going to class. It gave me a fulfillment of my life, and I just enjoyed all the courses when I was in school. I wasn't a very good writer, but I liked to get involved in that type of thing, but physically I didn't write very well. History also was a really favorite of mine, not only local history, but the history of our country and how things got started. It was very interesting to me to see times change, and at that time I had a very narrow picture of what history really was, and I was interested in what actually the whole country. I didn't really get involved in world history until later on when I was at upper grades.
Do you have any idea how school was different then than now? And I know you were just in our classroom playing Carp Quiz. Any thoughts how things might be different now?
I'm not too sure I have a good picture of that. School, I feel in those days when I was going to school that school was more rigid and discipline was tight. I can recall not really fearing my teachers, but the fact that I had to stay in line or else I don't feel that the present schools are that way, which I don't believe is anything wrong, but it's just a different way of teaching the children and having them follow their instructions.
Would they have gotten paddled, or what type of discipline would kids get back then?
My recollection that there was always a rule that there wouldn't be any paddling, but I also feel that there was sometimes. To my knowledge, I don't think I ever got involved in it, and maybe that just reflects that I was brought up to really respect adult leadership and instructions, and I just didn't want to get myself in trouble.
What did you do at recess and for physical education?
I believe the real memory I have is playing marbles, different kinds of marbles. But we always went to school with a pocket full or a bag full even of marbles, and we played different marble games. Now, we were not out on the field enough to really get involved in a baseball game other than the regular athletic programs. But most of the time, and I don't think they do it now, I haven't heard that they do, but I think we played marbles at every recess if it was only 5 minutes.
What did you have for lunch, and did you bring a typical lunch?
At lunch, I had an aunt and an uncle who were doctors in Carpinteria, and my family had me walk from school to their home, and I always had lunch in their house until all through high school. My folks felt that that was something that was available, and perhaps that kept me out of trouble during the noon hour. But I often think back on that. I walked about 3-4 blocks to their home, had lunch, and came back to school.
Did you know what you wanted to do for a living when you were in school? And tell us what you do now and what your father did. Back to schools, do you remember what kids, boys and girls wore to school back when you were in grade school and high school?
I first think of corduroys. Now, girls didn't wear corduroys, but most of the boys wore corduroys, I would say, as blue jeans are the popular thing now. And I really, I can picture more or less what the girls wore at that time, but I don't know as I could describe it as to their, much as to their pattern and the type of material that they were made out of.
Do you remember typically what you would have in your pockets and how much allowance you got?
A little bit of allowance, but it was a little hard to get any allowance. Just across the highway was a service station run by a small family, and once in a while we might go over there and get maybe some bubble gum or something like that. But we always had marbles. Our pockets had marbles, more marbles than money. And of course a pocket knife. That's another game we used to play. Was I forget what we call it, nibbly. But anyway.
Nibbly something?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And how would you play it?
Well, you would have a knife in certain positions, and then you'd flip it over, and it would come back in the dirt, and you would cut a pie, or you would do it standing up and throw it, and it would make 1.5 turns and end up, and it would cut the pie, and you would claim that land that you have put that knife into. And so the one that claimed all the land as you went around the circle ended up with the winner. And I do believe that occasionally it meant you lost your pocket knife and had to explain the things at home as to why you no longer carry a pocket knife.
These days, you can't carry a pocket knife to school. You may realize that.
That's true too. Now, I'm not too sure whether we were allowed a pocket knife. I assume we weren't. But we had lots of extra pockets that we could take care of that all right.
Uh-huh.
Also, you're talking about a time that's considerably years ago. And so there's a little bit of void in this old head as to exactly how we did those things in those days.
Were you aware that Aliso was segregated when you were in school? So you weren't at Aliso because you weren't Latino, but were you aware of that, and how did people feel about it, and what do you think about it now?
Yes, I was aware that it was segregated. I didn't, I was just raised that way. I had no feeling toward the fact at that time, if I can remember right, the only legal way that it could be separated was by color, I believe. No, by Indians. Indians had their own school. And so to justify having a separate school, anyone at Aliso school had to be called an Indian, classified as an Indian.
Really?
Now, I believe this is absolutely true, and everybody just turned the other way. And then, about the time I was getting out of school, white people started taking this seriously as segregation of race and unfair treatment, and situations started to change. But in my generation, we had no racial feeling. My first racial feeling, unfortunately, was when I went to college. And I noticed it there, and I couldn't believe it.
What did you notice in college? And what college were you at?
I went to UCLA. Once again, I was expanding my agricultural training, and it was the only one that had a complete course in agriculture that related to the type of agriculture that we had here in Carpinteria. And so I went to UCLA, and as soon as I got there, I was just shocked by the racial feeling that was in the big city. It wasn't Then's when I realized that we had very little racial feeling here when I compared it to what it was in the big city.
Interesting. So here, people didn't differentiate so much between races and cultures, but people did more in Los Angeles, the bigger city? Did you have Latino friends growing up?
Pardon me?
Did you have Latino, Mexican-American friends growing up?
Oh, absolutely. We were all, I hate to say it this way, but in those days we were all the same. I never thought about it. It was just who were your friends and who you enjoyed being. It had nothing to do with the color of the skin or what area you came by. I think now a lot of people have more feelings of the difference between the United States and Mexico. Now some people try to, it seems to me anyway, they try to exaggerate that difference. This country used to belong to the Mexicans, and so there's some feel that it ought to be given back to them. They want it back, but I just didn't separate friends like that. And I look back on it often as I drive by Aliso school and wonder at what age level did I realize that Pedro wasn't coming to our school. But we had, when I think of Pedro, I did have a dear friend, Pedro, who he and I were in track together, very close friends. And I never thought about the fact, hey, how come you're in this school? You're supposed to be. There was none of that. No feeling of that in my head, anyway.
Wait, he went to a different school than you in grammar school, but then he came to the high school because the high school wasn't segregated?
I believe that's right, yes. Yeah. I believe that's right.
Do you know whether the kids, when they were in the segregated school, whether they were any behind at all when they got to the high school, or one way or the other?
No, I don't. I don't think I did realize anything like that. In fact, I think about it now, and I think that mostly the how a student does in school depends upon how much his parents help him and encourage him to get education. But I firmly have the belief that in almost all cases, race is immaterial if the people want to apply themselves and get an education.
Well, what were the streets like in your youth, in your early years? Were the streets different in Carpinteria than they are now, and was there different types of transportation?
Yes, the streets were different, but they were all paved, and but narrow. There wasn't the nice freeway that they have through now. It was over several blocks and was just a 2-lane freeway. It isn't much bigger than that now, to tell you the truth. It should be a little bigger, but I don't recall it, particularly when I was in high school, why we had good paved roads in all directions.
Tell me, did you hike and fish in your youth?
Oh, indeed we did. We went up the Franklin Trail and would stay from Friday night till come back on Sunday night. Stay
Really?
2 days over there and fish over there. Of course, there wasn't the Juncal Lake at that time, but there was a good stream of fish. That the fishing was good.
So what was your destination? How far up would you get?
We, from here, we went over 2 range of mountains.
Really?
It was probably 12, 14 miles. And then as a family, we would go with a pack animal. I can remember going up what we call the switchbacks before it goes over the final peak. And my mother rode on a horse, and we had a pack animal. Everybody walked along with it, and I walked behind the horse that my mother was riding on and hung on to the horse's tail when it got too steep, and that helped me get over and keep up with my older brothers and sisters.
I know that the Franklin Trail, which is currently closed, may be reopened again. That should be great for the community. Did many people in the community back then take advantage of going up in the hills?
Not an awful lot, but yes, quite a few. I mean, we went quite often, and there were 2 cabins over there.
Over near where Hunkle Dam is today?
Yes, one on this side and one on the other side of the canyon up in there, and belonged to 2 brothers of the Morris family, Dick and Harb Morris, and they were very helpful to us. Anytime we wanted to go over there, we could use the cabin, but we mostly, of course, camped outside, but it was nice having a cabin. But we did it as a family often, too, so that I had 2 sisters, and my mother, the whole family would go over. Oh, yeah, we've been all over those mountains, I'll tell you for sure. I really enjoyed that.
Now, I remember seeing a picture of you and some steelhead trout. Tell me about the steelhead trout.
Well, of course, that was in the Carpinteria Creek right here on the edge of our ranch. And
I know you're not allowed to fish steelhead trout today because they're endangered species, but I guess they were more plentiful back then?
Well, either they were more plentiful or there were less fishermen. I don't know which it was, but always in the late summer, why the creek would stop running, and then little by little, why the local farmers used more of the water for irrigation. This ranch was irrigated by water that was diverted out of the creek up a mile or more, and there were numerous families that used that pipeline that came clear down. I still have a division box on my ranch where it was divided to go to the different ranches down below here. But as the creek dried up, why, there were pools where if we didn't fish them out, why, they would die. And so we didn't look at it on a legal basis. It was just any way you could catch them. And we used, people say pitchforks. I don't think we ever used pitchforks, but I know we had about a 1.5-foot iron bar bent at the bottom with a hook on it, and we would just, and a handle on the other end, and we would just let that slowly get under a fish that we could see was just going like this, just waiting to go up creek, which it couldn't do anymore because it was in a pond, and without enough water, and we could just hook them and bring them out.
So they were so plentiful then. It'd be great someday if we really had a good run of steelhead coming back, which we may do by unchanneling some of the creeks and some other creek management. Did they taste good?
Pardon me?
Did the steelhead trout taste good?
Oh, yeah. And this bridge down here, which at the edge of the ranch, which has now been replaced, but the old bridge, I can recall...
this is over Carpinteria Creek?
On the Carpinteria Creek. The 1st of May was the day you could legally go fishing. And that was the day everybody left town. Well, I couldn't leave town because I was in the business of hauling lemons, and so about 5, 6 o'clock after we'd finished our day's work, I would stand on the bridge down here and catch 4 or 5 fish that we could have for dinner that night. They were really quite plentiful, and I don't recall that there was much competition for getting the fish. It was just assumed that if you wanted to go down and pick 2 or 3 out, why, that made a good dinner.
What was some of the popular music you listened to in your youth?
I listened to music a lot, and I played in a little band occasionally. I played a trumpet, not too well, but I played. I also, in fact, my family had a little family orchestra. And
so what type of music was that? Was it jazz or?
No, it was just more or less marching band music. And I I played in when I went to college, I played in the UCLA band.
Huh.
And enjoyed that.
What type of dancing was done back then?
Dancing was more or less on before the days of the jitterbug. It was very slow and almost waltz, more the waltz type of dancing.
Do you remember when the jitterbug came out?
Oh, indeed, I do.
Was that crazy?
Yeah, it was. I just have a picture of legs and arms flying around, and but
kind of like moshing today.
Like,
do you know what moshing is?
No.
Okay, well.
Now you're way past my time.
But you were saying?
But it was just literally jumping, and I always excused it because the boys didn't have a good feeling of rhythm and time, and so all they did was just kind of get out and jig around and kick their feet up. But there were some couples that it was very interesting.
What was dating like when you were a young person, and how did you meet your wife?
Dating was limited, very limited. And I'm talking now at the high school level. When I went to high school, I was let off at the door and picked up at the door. I didn't drive anybody or go pick someone up, and that I think was about normal situation. There were a few people that had cars that they could drive at night, but in the most, parents took their children to a school dance, and it wasn't really much dating. Now, when I got to college level, of course, it was entirely different, and I met my wife in college, probably at the third year after I was in college, and then.
Did you meet her in a class or on a blind date, or how?
On a blind date. She belonged to a sorority, and my sister belonged to the sorority, and my sister said we're going to have our annual dinner dance at the Huntington Hotel in Pasadena. This is really high class for these young people, and she said there's a real nice girl that lives from down in Tustin near Santa Ana, and she doesn't have a date, and it was my sister's roommate, and wondered if I would take her, and I said, well, I guess so. What harm can I do? And from then on, she was my partner.
To change the subject a little bit, in Carp Quiz, the game show we played, there was a question about Charles Lindberg. Do you remember when Charles Lindberg flew to town here?
Oh, indeed I do, sure.
What was that like?
He came into the airport, what we call the airport, which is just out by the city hall now. And he flew into the airport. His sponsor was Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight lived in Montecito. She was an aunt of the Wymans, which were prominent people, and the Wyman's son. He and I were always competitive in grade school and high school together as far as tests go and test scores and so forth. I knew the family well. I would occasionally go over and stay overnight with them. They lived in Serena, and so I had a little head information. In other words, Frank Wyman's aunt was sponsoring Colonel Lindbergh when he came here.
And what was it like? Did people show up when he flew in?
Oh, yes. People came and looked at the airplane, and we had a man in town that was probably 3, 4, 5 years older than I am, and he was very interested and dedicated to the coming of airplanes. And
was that Bauhaus?
That's Hugo at Bauhaus, and so he was involved when Lindbergh came in, and ever since then I always think of Charles Lindbergh as a almost as a Carpinteria boy. You know?
What was he like? Was he friendly to people?
Oh, indeed. He was a very friendly person, and just a common individual that was just going about the business, and you know, actually, to the good of the world, he did a lot for the advancement of airplanes.
I know that he was very popular from his solo flight across the Atlantic and his other feats. But then when World War II came, he apparently didn't support the U.S.'s involvement in the war. Did he become less popular after that?
Not to people that I know. And I have so much thrown that out of my mind that I'd forgotten it entirely until you mentioned that now. But yes, that was quite a problem. And there was a real difference there that took him away from either doing his share of advancing use of airplanes or getting around with people on a friendly basis. I felt very, very unfortunate that this took place. I'd forgotten all about that, but yes, that's true. You know, he flew across the Atlantic Ocean. He didn't fly around Carpinteria Valley, and this was a world most outstanding thing that happened during those years of advancement of airplanes. And but he did have a political problem there that affected it.
Did the airport here in Carpinteria, which is Costa's auto repair place, was a hangar in the airport, I believe?
That's correct. That was the hangar.
And did the airport go out of business when the airport in Santa Barbara was built?
I don't know really why the airport in Carpinteria didn't advance, but it never did become much of a commercial airport. You see, there was also an airport in Serena.
Serena is where Padaro Lane is? Serena?
Yeah, The area we call the Triangle, which is just south of the polo field. There was a little airport there, and it never went very far either. Neither one of them were very commercial to really where they got to be a paying thing. Now, there was a third airport at Parsons. Are you aware of that?
Where was that?
Parsons is where 150 meets the freeway.
Right here in the Carpinteria
Just
Valley?
past the industrial park. And that is south of industrial park. And I've come in and out of that field quite often. They used that field to develop the offshore oil fields.
There's still a little bit of a runway there or hangars there,
That's
I believe?
correct, yeah. It's Louis Parsons' property. And it used to be a full field, but it wasn't very level. And it was kind of dangerous to, you came in from the south over that kind of deep hole where Rincon Creek comes down, and you had to get down pretty close to that, and then as you landed, you were coming downhill, and so you had a little trouble stopping at the far end of the field. But I've flown out of there quite times.
Tell me about Cerca Del Mar. What was that like, and for people that don't know about it?
Cerca Del Mar was a club that was mainly just a large dance floor that people joined. As I recall, maybe their membership was somewhere around $100, and then they were a member.
And where was it?
And it was right at the foot of Carpinteria Creek, where Carpinteria Creek gets into the ocean. And it was a very nice, large, wonderful dance floor.
And there was a pier there too, is that right?
And there was a pier also that went out at that time. It never was used very well, very often, and finally just deteriorated. But there were times when Cerca Del Mar was the main social event every weekend.
what did you do during World War II, and what was the town like during World War II and the Depression leading up to it?
World War II was a time when either you went into the service or you stayed home and worked and kind of kept out of circulation.
Why did you have to keep out of circulation?
Well, maybe I'm just using this on my own personal feelings, but I didn't go into the service. I had a degree from UCLA and had a reserve commission in the ROTC. I was a first lieutenant in the ROTC, but due to health reasons, I was not allowed to go into the service. And so a supposedly healthy person who I worked hard with a trucking business where I loaded and unloaded lemons all day, and there wasn't anything wrong with me physically as long as I wasn't sick. If I was sick, I would be off for 2 or 3 days and then I could get back to work. But anyway, that didn't qualify me, and I went to induction several times and failed, and so I never went to the service. And so I felt like, here's a young, strong fellow, and he's not out helping the whatever, whether it's a good cause or bad cause. But anyway, and so
well, in a way, was it embarrassing that you weren't?
True, yeah, I was embarrassed to be out and around, particularly in the evening. You know, we used to go up into Santa Barbara and go to El Paseo and have a good time up there. They had a dance floor at El Paseo, and everybody of the teenagers and a little older would congregate there on Friday and Saturday nights. And I gave that up entirely. I can't say I wasn't accepted, but I just felt that I shouldn't be accepted. Maybe I could put it that way.
Now, you told me it was your asthma
that's right.
that led to you not being part of the military.
Yeah,
but you did do some protection on the sand dunes here, or what did you say?
Oh, yeah. I joined the State Guard, and our duty was to protect the coast. And we had stations all up and down the coast. I went clear down and took courses down in Los Angeles at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. There was the headquarters. And we had stations along the coast that were manned by volunteers.
Were there any stations in Carpinteria?
Oh, yes, right near the bottom of Linden, the beach, right in the sand dunes there.
And what would the station be like? A little hut?
Yeah, just a little hut. And there were 2 people that would man the station always, and 24 hours a day. And they would look for strange airplanes, report anything that they thought, report any airplanes that went by, and then that was sent into a center. But if they were suspicious airplanes, ones that they didn't think should be there, they reported immediately and into a central location.
Now, there weren't any incidents in Carpinteria, but there was up the coast a little bit, wasn't there?
That's right. There weren't any incidents, that's right, in this. But there were reports, numerous reports, but no actual contact that we knew of on land. But in Elwood...
and that's where the Bacara Hotel is now?
That's right, yes. In that area, just south of the Bacara, there was an oil development there, and a pier, and a Japanese submarine actually surfaced there and put shells into a reserve tank, petroleum tank. Did minor damage, but it was the biggest thing that happened in either direction from Los Angeles to San Francisco.
Really?
And it was actually, it made people realize that this was a possibility, that the Japanese would actually try to make a landing on our shores.
Did the Depression in the 30s affect you and your family and friends?
Oh, yes.
What was it like? How so?
Well, luckily, in the lemon industry, financially, we were able to, almost by family, our own family, run the lemon orchard that we had, and it didn't suffer too much, so that actually we did have an income. But there were just thousands of people that lost their jobs and had no income. And
were people homeless in the area, or did any people lose their homes?
Yes. People lost large investments, lost their homes, and obviously this was a time when I wasn't really up to the level that would really realize how serious this was.
Because you were a little younger then.
But I do know that the word in my family was that the lemon industry was doing well enough that we wouldn't lose our ranch. But it meant pinching on everything, and everybody got to work, and that's when we started real seriously getting into rhubarb business, which was something that just the family could do. And the old Model 8 truck that we had would get the rhubarb into Santa Barbara, and we supplied the city of Santa Barbara with rhubarb, and it was just another way to pick up $1 or $2. But it had to be done by just this family. We couldn't afford to pay anybody to do it. And then later on, we developed more land, and we did get 2 very faithful, dedicated employees. But the times were just so limited.
To change the subject a little bit, do you recall the train station here in Carpinteria when there was a depot there?
Yes.
What was that like? And did people use the trains more then?
Yes, they did use the trains more. In fact, I can remember when some destroyers went on the shore up near Lompoc, and I didn't go, but my 2 older brothers, the trains were going through so slowly that they jumped on a train and went all the way on the train to see where these destroyers crashed onto the beach. And in other words, in those days, the trains must have been just poking along, because that was the only way you could get to where they went on, and they went that first day where the word got around that these destroyers had crouched on the beach. But yeah, there was a little depot there, and a warehouse that was up about truck loading level. I can remember unloading green beans to be shipped to New York, and a train came in there and parked, and we would bring our produce down and load it on a train that would also get ice from Santa Barbara, and they'd ice it down, and it would go off to New York, and then...
Would you get ice here in Carpinteria from Santa Barbara from the train?
They had an ice house in Santa Barbara.
I see.
And so they had to ice it before it went across country. And then also I can remember when the polo fields first started, the polo animals, ponies, came in on rail, and they unloaded them down at that station and walked them out to the polo field. And the train also, I remember, had all what do you call, including the saddles and all the equipment, their hay, everything came in those trains. And I remember I was so excited to see it all come into town and be unloaded and taken on. Of course, all the material went out on trucks, but the horses were walked out. It was in a small way. It was like the circus coming to town.
Nice.
And they played polo out there at the polo field.
Was the movie theater back in your youth the same place where it is now?
Yes. Well, not the original. The original movie theater was a tent.
Huh. Do you remember that?
Oh, indeed I do.
And where was the tent?
Yeah, behind the Beach Liquor.
Beach Medical.
Yeah,
That's where the tent cinema was?
They set up a tent there, and it was just a tent with movable chairs in there. And I really can't tell you, and I don't have a full picture of even what time in my life that was, but I would have said that I was just 8 or 10. And I can't recall, but it was more or less Western pictures. Somebody riding around a horse and shooting at somebody, something like that, that kind of thing.
And then do you remember when the current theater was built?
And then they moved up. Ollie Prikett.
Oh.
Ollie Prikett was the man. And he came in from Hollywood, and this was quite a thing.
He was the man with the tent theater, huh? He had the tent.
Yes, but he also moved up to the new place, too.
Oh,
And on Carpinteria Avenue. And that was a kind of an art center, particularly at first. Why, they had school plays there, and some kind of community activities. And then for years it just practically died out, although no, it died out as far as my use of it goes. And I've seen it being repaired, and I knew they had some little troubles, and I don't know where it's financing or what, but it's right next to my favorite barber shop, and yet I've never been in it for no reason at all, but I just haven't been accustomed to going to movie theaters. I don't go to Santa Barbara either, so I really haven't followed that.
Okay.
But and also above it was a pool hall, which is now down on the lower level.
Oh,
But it moved up there, and then there are now apartments up there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many, but before that, there was a pool, and I believe they even had a dance floor up there.
What was it like when the Coastr Highway came through town? That was before the freeway was built, right? Before the freeway was built, did the Coastr Highway come through town on Carpinteria Avenue?
Yes, exactly.
And what was that like? Was there more traffic then?
Yes, there was, but not an awful lot. Not a lot. Really, it wasn't very much. But, it's Carpinteria Avenue. And I can tell you exactly what there was, because when I was probably 12, I used to wait down there after 5 o'clock for a truck to come by to pick up our avocados. And the only packing house for avocados was in Los Angeles. And so a truck that took all different kinds of material into Santa Barbara, not produce at all, would turn into a produce truck going back to Los Angeles, and I would sit there with the family truck waiting for him to come through. And I would be there by 5, and sometimes the truck wouldn't come till 8. And, just every once in a while a car went by, very little traffic.
Did it disrupt things much when the freeway was built and it kind of separated the town in two halves? What was it like when the freeway was built?
Yeah, it was a little difficult. One place I think of is Star Pine, which is a little branch street in the middle of the valley, and it went from central town to way out a little bit into the valley, and that was developing as a residential street. And here comes a freeway and just cut it in half, went right through the middle of it, and went through the middle of the valley, of the city, of the little city of Carpinteria. And if you really take a good look at it, why, you realize that there are residents on either side, but there's very little continuity as far as transportation and availability across the freeway.
That must have been quite a shock to the town to have this big thing come right through the middle of it.
Exactly, and it was quite a while coming about, and they dug the hole. You know, it's down in a channel going through the valley, so it was. But one thing that it did is it drained the agricultural property on the mountainside of the highway. That was a swamp.
Oh, is that right, huh?
Yeah, it was quite swampy over there.
Should I let you get that?
Yeah, if that's all right.
It's okay.
Hello. Oh, yeah, Joanna, how are you? All right, bye-bye. My dear caregiver, sweetest person in the world.
Nice.
Oh, she's wonderful.
Well, what type of caregiving does she do for you?
Well, like I've had heart surgery, you know, and I'm going for a checkup on that. I've had a bad fall, and frankly, I'm almost convinced that I've had a concussion and have a slight forgetfulness and so forth. And but she is a certified caregiver, but she's just a real sweet person, and she watches my calendar, and she has a copy of it, and she knows what I'm doing, and she reminds me about this and about that.
Nice. Is your wife still around?
No, she passed away 3 years ago.
Oh. Was that tough on you?
Oh, still is. You're going to make me cry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. No. She was the most wonderful person. Just wham, cancer. Just took her. Yeah. I just hate this life.
Yeah.
You know, because I had such a beautiful life. That is, we were just saying, I met her at UCLA, you know, and she just beautiful person, lovely family she came from. She was the only child. For an only child that's supposed to be spoiled, well, she wasn't spoiled. She just spoiled me.
Do you have any thoughts for people who are married of how to make a good marriage?
You know, I've thought about that so much, and obviously I didn't appreciate it that much. You see, I didn't. I mean, to have a lovely woman that would put up with the hours that I used to work. 4 in the morning. I used to drive to Los Angeles 3-4 times a week. Unload a truck, come back, load it up, get it ready to go the next day, you know. And she was raising 3 kids. And putting up with everything else that goes on. She did a beautiful job. My children are just fine people. And they sure take care of me now.
That's nice.
But as I say, it's been, well, it'll be 3 years in May, and it just seems like yesterday to me. And this gal, for a year and a half or more, took care of March, and she now takes care of me. And
it must be nice having your dog around, huh?
oh yeah, and this is her dog.
Oh, that's your caregiver's dog?
No, this is Marge's dog, my wife's dog.
Oh, your wife's dog,
And she mourned worse than I did for 6 months or so.
Really? Was she depressed?
Huh?
She was depressed?
Yeah, she went from room to room, just yeah, just tough. Yeah, and now she's kind of devoted to me now. But yeah, we had some bad times in this house, and as you see, it doesn't go away. And I apologize, but
no problem.
That's the way life is here.
It's the same everywhere, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we don't appreciate the good things we have until they're gone.
Yeah.
And So that's what's happened here, and
Maybe you're saying this will help remind others that they should appreciate what they have while they have it.
oh, absolutely. And I, as I associate with my friends, I try not to be bothersome about it, but once in a while I gently let them know, hey, you guys don't realize what you have, and appreciate it, I can't say I didn't appreciate my wife, because I did. She was just, as I say, a wonderful person. She was educated, she was a school teacher, and everybody loved Marge. And in 6 months she was gone. But then this little gal here, little Joanne Morris, took care of her, did a beautiful job, and since then she just checks me on the phone like this. She checks my calendar, she'll come and she'll leave a nice meal for me, and then she'll leave a little more in the refrigerator, so I never have to go out to dinner, although I do. I go to Zucker's a couple times a week maybe.
Do you have any advice to young people today, how to get ahead in the world and how to lead a satisfying life?
The most thing I can say is that you can't be afraid to work, to apply yourself to something, and most of all, learning. You learn a lot in school, but you learn a lot in life too. And you got to think about what you're learning, what you like about other people or other places or whatever, and you have to apply that to yourself and to what you want. I can't dictate what anyone should do. But
so you're saying you should focus on learning after school as well as in school?
Oh, absolutely. School is just I was going to say a small part, but it's a technical place to learn. And you have to, through school, and with the hope that you have some teachers. I mentioned that to you. I can see that you are able to teach without holding a whip on them. You want them to want to do the right thing, but they later on they have to apply that, And I like to hear people that refer to what a teacher told them 5 years ago or something. I think that's wonderful. That shows they have applied their learning to their personal life, and now it still means something to them.
Do you have any thoughts about kids who are afraid that they might be bored in a job and they only want to be excited all the time?
Sure. Well, I had many employees that way. They wanted to drive a truck. That sounded like fun. I could see it starting to diminish. Many people I have told, hey, Bob, it looks to me like maybe you might want to go and do something else. What do you mean, boss? I said, well, you've kind of lost interest in your job, I've noticed, and oh, no, I like this driving truck. I said, well, that's fine if you do, but be sure you do. There's lots of other jobs, and you're young yet. You haven't really settled. You may not even have a house and so forth. So move around. I don't mind. And I'm not telling you to leave the job. I kind of, maybe I did it too much, but I did that quite often to the guys. But they had to realize that, which I told them. I said, now look, with your education and your background, you're going to do something probably at this level all the rest of your life, unless you go back for more education. The average truck driver is a high school graduate. And so if you don't want to be a truck driver, you got to go and get higher education. although higher education is good, and so I'm not making that decision. It's the more education you have, the better you're able to handle your life and make your decisions. And so I said, it won't hurt if you're questioning now for a year. Take off, and maybe you have something else in mind that you'd really like to do. And so go ahead and do it. I'm not asking you to leave. I enjoy you working for me, and you're doing a fine job, but it seems to me that maybe you'd be happier doing something else. And I think that's important. Some people start in life and just work at that same level, and it gets to be dull, and that isn't good. I loved the trucking business. Still do. That's why I like this motorhome I have out here. You know, I just love to drive that thing. In the last 6 months, I've been all over Oregon and all over Nevada.
Good for you. And how old are you now?
57. Women, 87.
87, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah. And I used to drive 12, 14 hours a day. I think I'm careful, and I understand the vehicle. I know a diesel engine backwards and forwards, and I have a good piece of equipment out here. And the other day I was in Oregon and drove too far to that night, and I was here the next day, which the kids, rightfully so, gave me a bad time. But I stopped. I had this little fellow with me, and we'd stop and walk around and have a drink of water and maybe stop and eat. I have all the equipment in the motorhome, and maybe for as much as 45 minutes or so. And then we'd go on. And so I came all the way home. I had a fine time. But the trucking business I just stumbled into. And too many people do that and then stay with it. But I loved it. I really did. I still do.
On the other hand, when you stumble into things that you don't expect, they can work out.
Yeah,
you should allow yourself to be able to stumble.
You see, I've had a thorough agricultural education. Raised on a farm, always worked on a farm, went to college and got all the technical training about my type of farming, and I really enjoy it. I really do. But when I got out, I couldn't buy a ranch. I couldn't kick my older brothers and sisters off, and in fact, they were going to college. They weren't either. But anyway, I couldn't make a deal with my mother to buy this place until I had some money and could make a assurance. And so I just happened to have a friend that said, I'm going into the Air Force. And I got this old truck I just got, and I want you to run it. I said, do what? He says, oh, you figure it out. And so I started hauling lemons around here. And 2 men on a truck. And then I thought, gee, if you only had 1 man on this truck, you wouldn't have so much labor, would you? So I figured out, well, maybe if I could figure out how I could haul something from here to Los Angeles and back, there's only 1 man on that truck. So I offered to drive for a fellow that had a couple trucks, and he went back and forth to Los Angeles. So pretty soon I bought him out. And before I knew it, I was in the trucking business and had enough that finally that I didn't drive myself, but for years I drove every day 12, 14 hours. And dear Marge raised a family.
Do you have any words of wisdom you live by, or any personal philosophy?
Not necessarily. It just comes along. You know, when you're being too good to yourself and not good enough to other people, You know, those things really, if you think about it, but you don't plan your life that way either. Let's say it just kind of comes natural, and you got to lean on people, but you don't overdo it. I don't know you can really explain it that way, but if you think you can get along in this world without the help of everybody else, I think you're wrong. I think that you all got to get along, but in turn, you have to help them too. And I think of that even to the terrible situation that we're experiencing across the water now. You know,
the war in Iraq and the Middle East.
Yeah, in the Middle East. We got to get people that want to help each other, not hurt each other. And how we do that, we aren't too sure. And I don't think anyone's too sure. But I'm not one that condemns our government, but I certainly can't approve of it. I can't approve of anything that requires us to kill innocent people. And that seems to be what we have to do on an international scale. And that's barbaric, I think, you see?
So it sounds like your philosophy of life is to be helpful to others, and you yourself will feel good about it. Is that right?
That's right. But also, I think they ought to be helpful to me, too. You see, if you want to call that personal or self-serving, but it's to, what's the old saying, of doing to others as you want people to do unto you, you see? And I think that's important, and I think most people want to be that way. And it's a shame that we can't get everybody into that mode of thinking, that the more we help others, the more they're going to help us, and let's look on it on that basis.
Well, maybe with hearing words of wisdom like this, it will help lead people in that direction.
Yeah, I think if we think every day, now, did we do anything wrong that we really shouldn't have done? And let's admit it to ourselves, and maybe we can change the next day.